Welcome back from all corners of the multiverse, sub-bosses. My name, as always, is Boss Ron, and 24 hours removed from Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness, seeing it on premiere night. Well, Friday being the real premiere night. Thursday is like the early release night. I don't know how that works, but either which way, coming hot off of the release of Doctor Strange 2. And the format here for reviews on our channel are primarily going to be as objectively based as possible, focusing on the piece of content itself, not really getting into a conversation on how this thing shapes the whole socio-political, economical state, where I just sound like the next Twitter anime profile picture AVI that's indistinguishable from the others. So with that, let's roll up the sleeves and jump right into the quick synopsis of the plot before we get into the review bits of it, of what we liked, what we didn't like from the movie specifically. America Chavez is being chased throughout the multiverse by an unknown entity, just sending demons at her that seemingly wants to steal her powers. Through that, she can't even control her powers. Her powers are specifically generated right now, in this instance, out of adrenaline-based response. So fight or flight will trigger her ability to shoot a portal into another universe throughout the multiverse, kind of just giving her a quick escape from any fight that she's in. Through that, she finds herself in the MCU universe, where our Doctor Strange kind of picks up that she's being chased out and she doesn't actually belong in this universe, and takes on his own task to help her get back to the reality that she belongs to. Through this, he enlists the help of our favorite reality-bending, non-X-gene having Scarlet Witch, who should be able to help America get back to the reality that she belongs to, or at least explain some of the mystic pieces as to why demons are just kind of jumping through different portals chasing after her, which lo and behold is revealed this entire time. She's the one pulling the strings, trying to round out a plot point that we thought had concluded in WandaVision, where she just wants to essentially steal her kids from another universe within the multiverse so she can just be a mother again. This then results in Wanda chasing America Chavez throughout the multiverse to steal her powers so she can then steal her kids from another Wanda that exists in another multiverse. And throughout this chase, there is a lot of blood shed, as Scarlet Witch essentially is just on God mode. She has not only her innate magical abilities enhanced by the Mind Stone that Baron Strucker was experimenting on her in the past MCU movies, but now she's also imbued with the power of the Darkhold, which essentially, Cliff Notes wise, is almost like the Book of Hell with a bunch of just prohibited spells that you really don't want to do. Each time you do a spell, it corrupts you and makes you more and more crazy and more vexed and insane on some shit. It then comes down to, in order for our Doctor Strange to stop our Wanda, he has to then find the antithesis of the Darkhold, the Book of Vishanti, which is just the same Cliff Notes explanation I just gave, but literally just replaced hell with heaven, essentially. That'll imbue him with the power to stop Wanda, which, spoiler alert, Wanda ends up destroying the Book of Vishanti itself. In his search for the Book of Vishanti, Doctor Strange meets many universes where his counterpart exists, but he starts to find out that his counterparts have kind of a morally gray high ground when it comes to using sorcery to save the day, where if a life has to be sacrificed, or if a few lives have to be sacrificed, if it means the greater good, he's gonna have to do it. This concept then gets resonated upon, as with the destruction of the Book of Vishanti, Doctor Strange has to now turn to another iteration of the Darkhold itself in a different universe held by a super evil version of Doctor Strange, if you will, where he now has the abilities to stop Wanda with her own powers, essentially. Now, ultimately, Doctor Strange still is no match for Wanda, even with the powers of the Darkhold himself. She ends up folding him in like 2 minutes, and then America Chavez has to figure out how to control her powers and pull out the old Uno reverse card so Scarlet Witch can be transported to a dimension where her kids see her as the villainous monster that she is today, and not the actual mom that they've been living with for however long that they've been existing inside of this universe. Wanda finally sees the error of her ways. She understands that she has been acting like a monster throughout the whole premise of the movie, and decides that the only way to deal with herself is to take a page out of every Marvel movie villain's ending book ever and bury herself underneath a pile of rubble. Hats off to you guys who can kind of get what I'm saying without me having to actually say that word and get demonetized by YouTube. So Wanda's defeated, she decides to go the way of almost every Marvel villain so far throughout the movies. All of them end up not really returning for a sequel, if you can get what I'm still alluding to there. And we end up with a shot of Doctor Strange now being corrupted by the Darkhold himself, which kind of gives us the setup and the preface for Doctor Strange 3, if that's even on the board yet, which I don't think has been revealed in the slate as of the recording. And that's a quick synopsis of the narrative points that this movie ultimately wants you to take home. We have a new character in the MCU by the name of America Chavez, who can punch portals throughout the multiverse and travel. It's likely going to be some kind of a big deal in the near future. Scarlet Witch is also no longer just a superhero alias for Wanda, but in fact a mantle for evil sorcerers or sorceresses that have chaos magic imbued that become kind of Sorceress Supreme as far as you're concerned from that angle. And thirdly, Doctor Strange will go to any lengths he needs to and blend any moral gray line in order to get the job done. If it requires the sacrifice of a small village or a whole metropolitan area, he will do what he needs to do in order to protect the multiverse and the realms above. Review-wise, Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness is not a movie to necessarily write home about in terms of how awesome or how great it is or how it drives the plot of the MCU forward, I would say. It's honestly a good popcorn movie as far as Marvel's concerned. I think that's all they're really interested in making these days. We still have had no allusion to what the real next big bad is, besides 3 different hints for 3 different big bads, which just almost seems like we're juggling a lot of plot points that seem to get forgotten throughout the entirety of this movie. As for the crowd reaction, I had a pretty good turnout as far as my theater goes. There was a very big split between, you know, the hardcore, like Marvel fans alike, the normies who have just specifically been watching all the MCU movies and all the Disney Plus shows, and then as well as other normies who just wanted to kind of watch Doctor Strange 1 and then get the sequel in Doctor Strange 2 and just kind of like leave it at that. Like, this is just the only movie they're here to watch and not really paying attention to anything else. Throughout that, it seemed like the split of reaction there was very skewed towards the hardcore, like Marvel fans, and then those normies that just watch movies alike. There was a lot of disappointment, and there was a lot of confusion from everyone's front. It seems like a lot of the only people who liked this in my theater specifically were those Marvel fans that, you know, have just specifically been versed in the MCU and then have also specifically just been watching the Disney Plus TV shows, following up on the plots that happened from WandaVision, following up on the plots that happened from Loki, etc., etc. And that's where I wanted to point the focus of my review towards, was for that normie, just regular moviegoer crowd who didn't really seem to know what was going on. I had 2 people sitting next to me that fell asleep throughout the movie in very individual parts, and we were in a theater where it's like one of those sit down like restaurant kind of theaters where the server brings you food and stuff like that. He had to actually wake them up to see if they needed anything else, or like even wake them up for when he was passing out his check. The one thing that bothers me, and that I could hear from them, at least when we were getting up to leave the theater, was that they had no idea what was going on. And of course, if you're subbed or watching us here on the channel, I know you guys are smart enough to read the tea leaves with the boss himself. Disney and Marvel are definitely in the business of wanting to drive traffic to Disney Plus, and then also wanting Disney Plus to then drive traffic back to the movies itself, and just kind of create that revolving door of content, if you will. When there's not a movie in theaters, you're sitting in the seats at home, you're watching a show that's going to be rolled out throughout the next couple of months, and then you're back in the theater when the next movie rolls up. The problem is that there's still a margin of error, or there's still a demographic of people who are not going to want to pay for a Disney Plus subscription, which is then going to lead to scenarios like that crowd of people I was mentioning inside my theater, where they didn't understand what was happening. And Marvel didn't really do a great job at kind of recapping that in any consumable way for a viewer to stay engaged. I'll give them this. They did one recap for Wanda specifically, just so we could understand a little bit of her motivation in terms of why she turned out to be such a big douchebag the entire movie. However, nothing else to explain how the multiverse was stemmed, why this hasn't been a problem beforehand for anyone else, and then even touch on why some characters were swapped out for different like actors, or how they were existing in different universes, where they would have been dead, or etc., what have you. But on the flip side of that audience, the audience who actually is consuming the Disney Plus content, you know, they watched WandaVision, they watched Loki, they understood how the multiverse came to be, they understood why, a bit more in depth in terms of why Wanda is the way she is. They all kind of understood what was going on. They loved the movie for what it was, not really a dry eye leaving the crowd, which is great for them. And then there's the bucket of me alongside the other fans who have grown up with these characters essentially, you know, even from throughout the 90s, just if that's going to date myself a little bit, growing up with characters from the X-Men, growing up with characters from Spider-Man, reading a bit into the comics. Of course, we don't understand everything, or at least I'm going to say that I don't fully understand everything, but seeing as how these characters' archetypes played out in the movies, I felt very disappointed in what the ultimate product was that we had actually gotten inside of the Multiverse of Madness. To start, this didn't really seem like a Multiverse of Madness more than it seemed like the extended chase scene out of Terminator 2 Judgment Day where the T-1000 is after John Connor of Madness. And for the super invested, comic reading, superhero loving crowd, there are a few moments in this movie where, you know, there are definitely things put in there for you specifically. To start, as far as Act 2 goes, and I know we've had some of those appearances spoiled throughout the TV spots, but when we see the Illuminati themselves and we get shots of, you know, Captain Carter, Patrick Stewart comes back again dressed up in the actual getup from the X-Men 97 show. He's got the big, giant, bulky Transformer-like wheelchair, the green suit. There are things where I still, even though I wasn't enjoying my time throughout the movie, I jumped up and I was like, holy hell, like that's cool. But it seems that the producers at Marvel have deemed that fan service is not something that's going to be ultimately sustainable throughout the lifespan of these movies, or the next, you know, phase 5 and phase 6 worth of movies. Is that every time we get a fan service moment that starts to speak to the little kid that grew up with these characters like myself, those moments are very short-lived and they fall flat. And there were a lot of characters or references here in this movie where even myself, I was kind of asking towards the end of it, how would they let that happen? I feel like they definitely would have put a plan together. I mean, take for instance, without any further spoilers here, you have an organization in Act 2 by the name of the Illuminati for the Marvel Universe. From what I remember from the comics specifically, the Illuminati was built mainly for kind of having 6 of the greatest heroes of, you know, this universe specifically be protectors of their Infinity Gems, so that way no one could essentially do a Thanos again and walk home with all 6 Infinity Gems, or 6 Infinity Gems, but they would have to go through, you know, the likes of Black Panther, they would have to go through the likes of Namor, they would have to go through the likes of Iron Man to actually get those stones. These guys are all wrapped up and balled up within a 10-minute fight scene. And 8 minutes worth of that fight, and 7 minutes, I would say, worth of that fight scene is dialogue, and then 3 minutes is just a slaughter fest, almost akin to any kind of hack and slash movie that has come out recently. You know, think of like Halloween Kills, think of like even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot on Netflix, that stinger over there. That's kind of what that fight scene turned out to. I wouldn't have minded the Illuminati getting folded in 2 minutes if the explanation for how Wanda had the ability to do so would have actually been set up in a proper way. Throughout the course of the movie leading up to that second act fight, Wanda literally just had the ability to make powers up of her own. Specifically, in no way, shape, written form of rhyme or reason, it seems that her own innate powers, powered by her grief, powered by the Mind Stone that Baron Strucker experimented on her way back in the day from the Age of Ultron, you know, saga, and then also now enhanced by the Darkhold, seemingly gave her God mode. Nothing could stop her, whether it was Doctor Strange's mirror dimension, which gets rendered useless more and more throughout the course of these movies, or even just in general. She had the ability at one point to astrally project herself through a barrier from sorcerers at Camertage. Like, how was that possible? They didn't even bother to explain that. They were just like, nope, she's unstoppable. You just can't do it. She's just gonna do whatever she wants because she's trying to get this kid. And ultimately, the reason why she's after the kid isn't even for the dimensional traveling abilities, because she has the ability to travel through different dimensions based on something she read in the Darkhold. So she has the power to travel through different dimensions with the Darkhold and be with the children, but the reason why she's after America Chavez, spoiler alert, please, she's after America Chavez because, God forbid, something happens to those kids that she steals from a Wanda in a different dimension. She could use America's ability to punch a star portal to another universe and get a cure for that specific disease. If you were on God mode already, if you beat the Illuminati, if you beat the mirror mode, if you beat literally everything else in your path besides America Chavez, who learned her powers in the matter of 2 hours and put a fucking scratch on her, why did you need her powers then to find cures? Make a cure! You're already powered with the Darkhold! How hard is it to spin up a cure for cancer and just fucking leave it there? After the dust settled on like the car ride home, once you were able to get rid of the sensory overload happening from the bad CGI that was taking place, some of which was dropping the frame rates down from like 50 FPS to 30, back to 60, back to 24. Oh hey, I can blatantly tell someone's in front of a green screen like you're even watching me on this green screen. Once all that kind of settled, you then started to see a lot of the things that were introduced in this movie seemingly made no sense. At one point, America Chavez is put inside of a container that's supposed to house all superheroes, and this container can't be broken until it's required to be broken by a fire extinguisher from the outside because Wanda is chasing, the remaining Illuminati scientists throughout a building. And then now we have to go, so we're gonna break this fucking container and go home. So before this continues, turns into a 20-minute long angry rant, let's go ahead with our first ever review rating. How boss is Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness? Production team, one day, I know you guys are gonna have a little rating scale here, so I'm just gonna do it in tandem, and viewers, bear with me, just kind of picture what we're getting at. To start off our first ever rating for Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness, if I had to give it a boss rating, I would say this boss rating in terms of coolness and difficulty level would turn out to be, let's say, a 5. This is the second boss right after the tutorial level, where the game starts to kind of just funnel you through one specific area where the rest of the world is waiting on the other side, but you got to do the mechanic checks real quick. You got to make sure you can beat this boss in order to experience the rest of the world. That's the same experience that Marvel's putting us through with having to watch this movie. If you don't watch the Marvel movie, if you don't watch Doctor Strange 2, you can't actually get into the rest of the Marvel universe, as everything is going to specifically rely on what's established here in this movie, even as sloppy as it is. And of course, followed by the mini boss that exists too, which is also having to now watch the Disney Plus shows if you really want to be a part of the next 10 years of Marvel. This may or may not be our only controversial review on the channel as far as movies or games are concerned, but as far as Doctor Strange 2 is looking, it's a very mixed bag. Some people are singing its praises, other people are starting to tear it down brick by brick, but I want to know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments below. Viewers alike, sub-bosses who are returning for another video as well. Did you guys see Doctor Strange 2 yet this weekend? If so, what did you guys ultimately think about it? Were you confused? Did you see the What If series beforehand? And where do you think we're heading next, especially after that post-credits scene? I don't really think too much is going to stem from it. There are a lot of other plot points that have been set up throughout the MCU already that seemingly are either being forgotten about or being touched on in a different phase. I guess at this point, we'll cover that in another video. But as always, guys, let me know in the comments below. Happy to have a discussion here about the movie and even make follow-on videos. And if so, if you guys want to yell at me live in chat too, follow us on Twitch and subscribe to the channel too, because we go live on both. So you can catch us playing Elden Ring, finishing out our playthrough, or, shooting the shit on Guilty Gear. Yell at me in person. I'd love to have this discussion with you guys and just get to know your guys' thoughts on the movies, where you guys think the MCU is heading as a whole, as far as this being our first review that we covered. Did you guys enjoy it? Do you guys like the boss ratings? Is there anything you guys want to see from a specific, like effects standpoint? Let me know. Love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions, especially as we go forth and start, just checking out more of these movies and games as they come out. And of course, if you guys like the format of the review here, hit that like button above just to let me know some feedback. If you guys didn't like anything in particular, let me know in the comments below so we can be better for the next subsequent views that follow on afterwards. But as always, guys, my name's Boss Ron. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, follow us, chat with us when we go live. I'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Hopping back into Dimension 839 or whichever one it is that has the Fantastic Four out there somewhere. I'll see you guys next time.